Good morning, everybody. This is Robert Vanderwolk, and this is already the second Facebook Live Ask Me Anything episode. And I hope that you're joining me or that you're watching this, even in the replay if you can't make it immediately. Because today I really have a lot of interesting things to share, and it's all about the ego. So let's go for the ego talk. So the question is, what is the ego? And we all have our own concept about what the ego could be and what it's meaning or what it's meant for. But most of the time, we have a lot of misconceptions about the ego. Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it good? Is it bad? And even that is an ego question. Because the moment that we have a judgment based on our values, our standards, our principles, our beliefs, then the ego kicks in. So basically, to answer the first question, what is the ego? It is that small little voice that can pop up all of a sudden and then just rise to the front and say, hey, look, I'm not agreeing with this, or I think that this is wrong, or I think that this is right, or I have a different opinion. And from all of those ideas, the ego makes a stand and it makes a point out of what it is believing. And so the ego is a little part of our brain. It's not the true you. It's not the true me. It's not who we really are. It's just a part that we have. And most of the time we identify with the ego and we say, well, this is what I believe. This is what I think. This is what I value. And although those things are not necessarily right, nor are they wrong, but it's good to ask yourself the question, is this supporting me? Is this supporting me in my life? Is this supporting me in my contacts that I have? Is this supporting me in my work? Is this supporting me in my progress that I have? And so the ego can be put into separate parts, if you will. You can see it as a support system, but you also can see it as a system that is blocking you or preventing you from getting further, from growing, from becoming really the person, showing really the person who you are. So questions that I got is, well, what can you do about the ego? If it's not there to support me, then how can I get rid of my ego? Well, I think that's a very, very challenging task to do. It's a very interesting question, but it's also a very challenging task to get rid of the ego because, even though the ego is something that we made up, yes, we made it up. It's not something that was there already. It's something that we boxed into the label of ego. And from that point on, we started to use it in such a way that it becomes interesting, or that it becomes valuable, or that it becomes specified as something that we can use, even as a weapon towards others. Well, this is just my ego, this is something that I'm just using, or this is something that I just have that is part of me. Well, that might be true, but at the same time, the ego mostly comes from the point, or at least in everyday life, it comes from the point where we say, look, I'd rather be right, I'd rather have justification than I am happy. So in that sense, the ego is not there really to support you, and it's there to be validated. And this is the whole aspect of the ego. The ego is there basically coming from insecurity or coming from uncertainty about itself or about who it thinks that it is. Not who do you think that you are, because you have your true self, you have your real self. Your ego is not you, it's just a part of you. It's the tiny little voice inside of your head that says, this is what I believe, this is what I find, this is what I value, this is what my standards are. And if anybody is contradicting that, I'll rise to the front and I'll speak my mind. And that is oftentimes the cause or the starting point of a discussion, of a fight, of an argument, anything that can cause a quote unquote war between you and another person. And one of the ways to deal with that is actually to make your ego smaller. And the question then arises, of course, well, how do you do that? Well, in order to make your ego smaller, first of all and foremost, you have to be aware that your ego is popping up from time to time, because it can take a lifetime. And we're not all Buddhist monks going for meditation all the time, although meditation is a great way to diminish or to make your ego smaller. But we don't live in that kind of circumstance. I wish we would from time to time, but most of the time we're not. So one way to make your ego even smaller, or just a little bit smaller, is to become aware of it, that it's popping up. So the moment that you're in a conversation or in a connection with somebody, or that you are amongst friends or with other people, co-workers, whatever it is, and somebody says something and your ego is popping up, then and then especially you need to be aware of, hey, what is happening with me inside? Because there's two ways that we can look at our ego and deal with it regarding the external situations in our life, in any situation, in any moment. And one of them is, well, we let our ego pop up and we stand for what we believe in, and we are willing to fight for it, even at the cost of losing that connection in the moment or even long term, which is usually not a great thing. Or we translate and interpret the other person's words as something that is just being spoken. You know, that it's just there. Whatever their opinion, belief, value, standard is, they're just words. And it could be something that is their truth, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that it should be yours. And regardless whether or not it is your truth, it's something that you can also say, well, that is interesting. You know, I still am willing, and I'm still deciding to come from compassion and empathy, because that's the key point. The moment that you can come from compassion and empathy, and even love, I would say, although love is a very tainted word nowadays, then you change your perspective, you change your outcome, you change even your procedure on how you communicate and connect with these people. And when you come from compassion, when you come from empathy, it doesn't really matter that much what the other person is saying. And I know that this is a very big challenge. I know I mess up very, very often, and I fall back into ego, in one of the ego states that I'll describe shortly later in this Facebook Live video. But the moment that you have this conversation or this connection going, and somebody says something, and you feel that your ego is rising up and popping to the front and saying, hey, look, I disagree with this. Well, again, be aware that this is happening, and then choose either one or two choices, or maybe even three. The third one would be don't do anything, which is oftentimes not the best choice, because the moment that you don't do anything, then you let fate, or you let any other external circumstance decide for you what is going to happen next. Sometimes it is a great choice just to do nothing, not to respond, and just leave it, unless you have this internal ego fire burning up inside of you and thinking like, yeah, I have to keep my jaws clenched, I have to grit on my teeth in order to swallow my pride and not to speak up or speak out what is on my mind. That is not a good thing. I definitely wouldn't recommend it. But the other two options that you can do is either you choose for your ego, where it stands up and it says, well, this is what I want and this is what I believe and I'm willing to fight for it, which is usually a choice that has a consequence, that has, well, a quote-unquote negative outcome. Because the moment that you do that, again, then you lose the connection in one way or another. And if this happens oftentimes, if this happens time and time again, then in the end you really lose the connection, maybe even definitely or permanently. And the other choice, the final choice that I would say, look, this is probably the best choice that you can make, is to still interpret what is being said as words, as something that is their truth, as something that they value or that they believe. And regardless whether you agree with it or not, coming from compassion and empathy means that you translate those words and those remarks and those beliefs as something that they value, as something that they have as their truth, as their reality. And then saying, well, that's fascinating, or that's interesting, or, it's okay that you believe that. And from that point on, you can leave your ego aside. You don't have to have it in the front and start a discussion or start an argument or even start a fight, because usually that's not worth it. I mean, come on, guys, listen to what I'm saying. Most of the time when we have a fight, it's about small and tiny things. I wrote an article many years ago saying, there's always a fight in relationships about who left the socks where and why they're on the floor and not in the washing bin or in the washing machine. And even though this is an exaggerated statement, most of the times, when we do have an argument, it's about something tiny. It's about something that is not that valuable for us. We just pop up our ego and say, look, I want to be right. I want to have this, period. And that is the controlling part of our ego. So just to clarify, in that sense, the ego, with our 3 ego states, and this is all coming from transactional analysis, or TA. And if you want to know more about what I'm going to explain, then definitely check out my Facebook profile, because I posted a very interesting video, and I'm going to paraphrase what is in that video because I found it so valuable, about learning about the 3 ego states, that I think that everybody should definitely know this, because the moment that you know in which ego state you are, you can make a choice to shift it. And basically there's, again, there's nothing wrong with being in your ego state as long as it supports you to move forward, to grow, to establish or maintain or strengthen even the connection with others. And that is the point. You can use your ego in a negative way, in a destructive way, or you can use your ego in a constructive way where you actually get your results that you truly want. Unless you're looking for a fight, unless you're looking to create more of a distance, I would say, come from the point where the ego is constructive for you. Work with your ego, become friends with your ego, instead of using your ego as a shield for uncertainty, because that's what it is. Your ego usually comes from uncertainty, where it's not certain about itself, where it's not certain about the values, where it's not certain about the self-worth or the self-acceptance or the self-love, the self-confidence. It's all about the self. And from that point on, it makes up a big chest and say, oh, this is what I believe, and then we go to that point. And regarding self-confidence, by the way, there's also 3 layers, and I'll just quickly go over that before I get into the 3 ego states, because this is very, very much connected. If ego is connected to a lack of self-confidence or a lack of self-worth or an uncertainty maybe of self-love, self-acceptance, self-confidence, then we try to mask it. Most of us are trying to mask it, and I know that I'm doing that from time to time, and I used to do that a lot in the past. And so the 3 states that we have when it comes to self-confidence is that we have the top layer, which is basically the surface layer. So the surface layer of our self-confidence is that we show the world that we are very self-confident and that we feel great about ourselves. And Facebook, again, is a great example for that, because almost everybody that I see in my timeline is posting beautiful things and not posting the mess that they're in sometimes, and trying to mask their own identity, their true identity, the person who they really are, or to share the feelings that they really, really have. But this can be diminished, this can be crushed quite fast. So underneath that surface layer of self-confidence comes actually the lifestyle confidence. And the lifestyle confidence is basically something that you live by every single day. The routines, the patterns, the habits that you have, and they all create your level of self-confidence regarding what it is that you do in your life, which regards to how certain or how confident you feel about yourself in your life. And this can be derived from, let's say, your work. This can be derived from your financial status. This can be derived from your relationships. This can be derived from your level of health. And all of that creates your lifestyle confidence, level of confidence. But even this is not the core. The 3rd layer is the core confidence. Because the moment that something drops out, whether it is your finances, it's your work, it's your relationship, or it's even your health, and trust me, I've had my fair share of losing part of my health over the last 30 years, but even also my finances, my relationships, and my work, then, the question becomes, who am I if I'm not my job? Who am I if I'm not the partner in my relationship? Who am I if I am not that financially free or that financially abundant? Who am I if I don't have the vitality and the health that I used to have? And so most of the people, they associate their identity with what it is that they do, not what it is with who they are. And from this, the lifestyle confidence level actually drops down and goes to the point where you come into your core confidence. And if your core confidence is weak, then your lifestyle confidence and your surface confidence don't matter that much, because they're all just plastered and glued together in order to to make it appear that you are self-confidence, while at the core, at the root of your own identity, who you truly are, it means that you're still, lacking the certainty and the confidence and the self-love and the self-acceptance that you wish that you had. So at the core level of your confidence, that's who you truly are. Can you be okay with where you are right now? Can you be okay with who you are right now? And one of the simple and fastest techniques that I can give you, that I can provide you with, that I did for myself, is write down every single day. I know it takes a little bit of effort, but take about 5 minutes, whether it's in the morning or in the evening, or preferably both. Write down for yourself, what are you grateful for? What are you happy that you have in your life right now? What is it that you're grateful for that you do in your life right now? And most of all, definitely most of all, what are you thankful and grateful for that you are, who you are in your life today? Because who you are right now, that is actually what matters the most. And don't go back to, well, I'm happy because, I have this and this profession, or don't go back to the lifestyle. It's great, but it's all fluff in that sense. Who are you truly? If confidence would, or if you would be a tree and confidence would be the core of your tree, everything that you do and everything that you have are nothing more than the branches that reach out into the world. But it's not who you truly are. At the core, who you are, that's the question. And that's the question I'm asking you today. Who are you truly? If you're not your profession, if you're not your partner's boyfriend or girlfriend, if you're not your financial status, if you're not your health or your vitality, who are you truly? If all of that would be stripped away today, then what remains? And if that is something that you can find, in the essence of your being, then that is where you can derive your core confidence from. And maybe that means that you have to be a little bit more competent. Maybe you have to develop some more skills, first of all, towards yourself, and second of all, to become better at what it is that you do. But in the end, it's all about your self-confidence. So this is the three layers that I wanted to share with you just quickly regarding confidence, or regarding self-confidence. So surface level, and then underneath you have the lifestyle level, and underneath of that you have the core confidence level. Now let's go into the ego states, because this is really interesting. This is really fascinating. And when I video, I was amazed. I was baffled actually that, according to TA, transactional analysis, there's 3 ego states, and most of the time we're in one of these 3 ego states. And what is interesting is that they're all connected. So imagine at one point, at one level here on the top right, you have the top, middle, and the down part, and on the other side you have the top, middle, and down part as well. So imagine that these are 2 people. And when it comes to ego states, it always has to do with how you connect, how you communicate to somebody else. And the top, middle, and bottom are for both sides the same. So the top part is the parent ego state. And the parent ego states can be put in either one or two, one or the other part. And the one part is the controlling part. You have this parent part, this parent ego states, and it doesn't matter, by the way, whether or not you are a parent. We all have this. It comes from our parents, it comes from other parents, it even can come from teachers or other significant influencers in our life, where we go into the controlling part of our ego. And this controlling part of our ego state says, I need to have control over the situation. So I make a remark, I make a statement, and usually it's being downgraded. Well, it's not downgraded actually, but it goes down in the sense that you put yourself into a superior position regarding the other person. So for example, imagine that you have a coworker, and your coworker is always lacking, the effort, and tries to make half an hour less or even an hour less of work regarding what you do. You get, obviously you get frustrated because, you want to make sure that, the project is being done. You want to make sure that everything is getting done. And so it's very easy to get into that ego state of the parent, the controlling state, where you can say, look, I really don't appreciate this. You're always going home 1 hour short. You're useless. And from that point, you make a controlling state, because when you come from the controlling ego state, you make a statement from the controlling parent ego state. And what usually happens is when one person makes that remark, the other person has several options. So imagine that on this side, you have this person saying on the top, you're useless. The other person has the option to either go also in the parent ego state and say, well, you don't talk to me like that. And then you're going to have a battle. What happens most of the time, though, is that the other person's ego state, the other person's ego state goes down. So you get a cross connection, and from there, from the parent ego state all the way to the bottom right, you get the other person's response from a child ego state. So the child ego state here on the bottom right is where the child would say, or even if it's an adult, but from the child ego state, it would say, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, I won't do it again. And this is usually a state where, where the child, or when we were a child, or when you see people behave like a child in that sense, they're too flexible and too adaptive, and they're not really putting their own opinion forward. So they're taking the submissive point of view. And this can be neither good or bad, but when it comes from a parent point, I should point here, if this comes from a controlling parent ego state, the other person, actually it was this, I think, by the way, but never mind. If it comes from the parent controlling ego state, and the other person is here at the bottom, then you have a problem, because this can escalate. This is for me, this was very interesting, because most of the time, when you do have a fight, or when you do have an argument, especially from the ego, then a few positions can be taken. Either you take the parent ego state, the parent controlling state, or you take the child flexible or adaptive state, ego state. And then the situation is diffused. But most of the time, when you're in the submissive state, it's not going to feel very great, because you feel that you're being controlled over, and you feel inferior towards the other person. Now, there's many opportunities, or there's many possibilities between these two. You can have the parent ego state, the controlling part, on the one hand, and on the other hand. And then, even if this person on the left side says, you're useless, and the other person has the tendency to go back down here, then it doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to unfold. We humans are very, very creative. So if this person is going to say, well, you're useless, you're always cutting short or cutting time on the end, the other person can say, well, you don't talk to me like that. I refuse to accept that. And then you're going to have a battle where, in the end, the person who's going to say, well, you're useless, is taking the lower position. Actually, this one, I think, is taking the lower position, where it's feeling inferior towards the other. So the point is that if person A says, well, you're useless, and the other person says, well, you don't talk to me like this, well, you're always late. I say, well, I don't care, you just don't talk to me like this, so apologize. And then the other person can go into the child ego state, where it's adaptive and flexible, and then you have the other connection. It's always a cross connection. Now, this is just one part. Of course, you have two sides of every ego state. So the controlling parent state is one, and the flexible child state is one. On the other side of the parent state, the parent ego state, I should say, you have the nurturing parent. So imagine that, somebody's saying, I'm really not sure what to do. There's so much stress, and there's so many things to do, and I have so little time. This is kind of like whining and complaining. Then from a nurturing parent ego state, you would be probably tempted to say, you know what, let me help you. Let me offer you my support in order for you to make it easier. And oftentimes that can be very, very beautiful, and it can be very great. I know that I've been in that position many, many times for many, many years. But sometimes it really doesn't work, because if you're nurturing all the time, first of all, it means that your tendency is to put yourself on the second place. You value yourself less. And even if you don't do that, then nurturing can be very suffocating. So when you constantly nurture from a parent ego state in order to get validation, and remember this is the point that I want to make, it's most of the time, if not always, it comes from a lack of self-confidence, self-love, self-acceptance, validation, uncertainty about who you truly are, about how much you value yourself. And again, this is connected to the three levels of confidence, whether it's the surface confidence, it's the lifestyle confidence, or it's the core confidence. And if you come from this nurturing position, if you come from this nurturing ego state, then it can be very suffocating for the other, even if the other person doesn't ask for anything. You, as a person coming from the parent ego state, from a nurturing point, can be so incredibly suffocating that you're always there. You're going to do so many things that are not even asked for, and it's gonna mess up your connection, your communication, and even your relationship with the other person or other people. So we have the controlling part on the one hand in the parent ego state, and the nurturing part on the other hand. Now, don't get me wrong, get me right. The controlling part is sometimes great to have. You know, it's there. It's beautiful when you need to have structure, when you need to have order. This is perfect. And the nurturing part is also great. If you can care for somebody and help somebody out, support them, this is great. But they also have their flip side, and the flip side is that it can be used in a way that it's going to be destructive. From the child point of view, we had the flexible child ego state, and on the other hand, on the other side of the ego state for the child, you have this rebel, this I'm gonna do anyway what I want, and I don't care about any other's opinion. And this is something that can be great. Again, for the child, it's also both neither good nor bad, but this can also be constructive and destructive. If you're always going to be submissive from the flexible or adaptive child ego state, you're going to lose your own identity. You're going to lose your self-worth. You're going to lose your self-confidence. If you're going to come from the rebel part, you're going to tick off a lot of people. You're going to be sure that, you know, people are walking away from you, because sooner or later they're going to say, look, I really don't appreciate this. You're acting like you're so egocentric, even narcissistic, that, you know, where am I in this picture? If it's all about you, then where am I? So from that point of view, the child ego state coming from the free or the rebel or the I'm going to do what I want to do anyhow, and I don't care about any other people's opinions, these are both good and both bad, or however you want to label them. They're great and they're non-supportive. They're destructive and they're constructive in the way. If you're going to be in the child ego state where you're going to be the rebel, where you're going to be free, then great, because it can use you can use it as a way of creativity. On the other hand, it can also be very destructive, because if you're in the child ego state and you come from the point of, you know, I'm gonna do whatever it is that I want anyway, then it's gonna cause a lot of damage and even pain for those around you. And this is not what you want, because again, when you come from that point of the ego, then, you know, you basically lack the self-confidence and the self-love and the self-acceptance, because you want to do what you want anyway, regardless of what other people think about you, and even regardless of what the quality of the connection is with other people. You think about yourself most. It's all about me, and it's nothing about you, and I don't care. And even though people can have a very, very high tolerance for egoism or for narcissism, even at one point or another, they're gonna come to the conclusion: look, this is costing me more than it's going to deliver me, and then they're gonna move away. They're gonna say, look, I really don't appreciate this. You either need to treat me better, or you need to be a little bit more flexible. Again, on the other side of the child ego state, and be a little bit more cooperative. Now, this is the parent and the child ego state. And again, if you're coming from the controlling part, or if you're coming from the nurturing part, or if you come from the child part, where it's adaptive and flexible, or where it's the rebel, there's always a cross connection between the two. And this is something that is very, very valuable to keep in mind, because when you are in a conversation with somebody, or when you are connecting with somebody, and one of these states is popping up, whether it is in the other or it's in yourself, then usually you're going to end up with a situation that where the other, or yourself, depending on who's initiating, is going to end up in the cross section of the other. So if you're in a controlling parent state, most of the time the other is going to end up in a I'm going to do what I want, or it's going to end up in a way that's going to apologize. If you're going to be in the nurturing part, then the other part is going to be in the rebel part. The parent nurturing part has the connection with the child rebel part. And so this is something that you really, really have to be aware of. And you can change this. This is the great thing. You can change this by simply, first of all, becoming aware of the fact that your ego is arising. And secondly, to take steps to get out of that ego state yourself. And this brings me to the third state, and that is the middle. The middle is the adult state. So on the top you have the parent, in the middle you have the adult, and at the bottom you have the child. And the adult state sees everybody as equal. So when you're coming from the child state, you see each other as unequal. When you're coming from the parent state, you see each other as unequal. You know, you're not at the same level. But when you are coming from the adult state, you and the other person are both capable of dealing with the situation. You and the other person are both self-valued enough so you know you can move forward, whether it's in a conversation to solve a problem or to deal with an issue or anything in between. And in that sense, the adult ego state, which is still an ego state, is the most effective regarding any type of communication or connection that you have with others, because you value the other person as much as you value yourself. And you see that the other person is competent enough to deal with the situation. Now, let me give you a very clear but very corny example. Let's say that your roommate decides to take a shower. And again, I have this from a video. Your roommate decides to take a shower, and that's coming from the adult ego state. Okay, great, I'm gonna take a shower. But as soon as that person opens up the door and opens up wants to go into the shower, it sees a spider. And you know, your roommate is scared to death about spiders. So it starts to cry, yell, "Wow, there's a spider there!" You know, it immediately drops into the child ego state where it's afraid and uncertain, and you know, it's too flexible. You know, I don't know what to do, which means that if that person, your roommate, is at the child ego state where it's flexible, adaptive, and unsecure and submissive, the other person has the tendency, whether that's you or another roommate, to go into the parent nurturing state. And from there on, you know, the connection has already been made, because most of the time the person says, "Well, you know what, let me handle this. I'll take out the spider for you," and then that's it. Now, it doesn't seem like a big deal for most people, but you reinforce the behavior of the other person when you take that position. Same goes for the parent controlling state, and same goes for the child rebel state. And if you come from an adult ego state, then you say, "Oh, well, you know, look, there's a spider there. What are you going to do about it?" Or you can say, "Well, I'm sure that you'll find a way to deal with it." And even then, the other person, that roommate, can say, "Well, you know, I'm really, really afraid. Would you be willing to help me?" But then it comes not from the child state, but it comes from the point where it's an adult as well, where it says, "Look, I'm really afraid. Can you help me?" One of the things that I learned very, very clearly over the last couple of months during a training was, if there's no question, you don't have to take any action from another. So if there's no question from another, you don't have to do anything. You can do something out of goodwill, but most of the time goodwill doesn't pay off that much, especially when the other person is not asking for it. I'm not talking about charity. I'm not talking about contribution, you know, towards other people or anything like that. But it really comes down to, you know, intercommunication, interconnection between you and other people. And so when you're in the ego state of an adult, you value each other as equal, and you don't have to solve any other problems unless being asked for. And then still you have the opportunity and the option to say no. This is one of the characteristics from an adult ego state. It's the willingness to say no. No, this is not what I'm going to do. And it's not from the point that you're being a rebel from a child. No, I'm not going to listen to you. But you're valuing yourself enough that you're going to say, no, I can't do this, or no, I'm not willing to do this because this is crossing my own values, beliefs, standards, and so on. Again, this is an ego state that we're talking about, not a personality, not something that you have to identify with, because your ego is just part of who you truly are. It's not who you are entirely, it's just a part of who you are. So again, I would definitely recommend to watch that video. If it's possible, then I'll definitely link in the description below or above in this video to that video, because it's really, really interesting to check that out. And the thing that I want to close off with, because I don't want to, go for a whole hour now, the thing that I want to close off with is think about how you want to interact with other people. Do you want to come from the point where you're right, where it's valuable to you to mask your own uncertainty and self-worth, self-love, and self-acceptance, and to be right? Or are you willing to come from the point of empathy and compassion and even love, where you say and act, okay, this is this is what you're saying, this is your statement, this is your truth and your reality. Fine. Those are just words. Your opinion about me or what you say doesn't say anything about me. I value myself enough, and I see myself more and beyond the fact of just having an ego. And you choose the peace. You choose the serenity. You choose, the calm within, and still willing compassion and empathy. Now, I know this is not easy, and the moment that I said this and the moment that I decided to do this, the universe started to test me out, and it was very, very challenging. And sometimes, we need to go through these challenges. The moment that you are triggered, it's the best way that you go through the trigger, deal with the pain or the uncomfortability or the uncertainty or whatever it is, because that's where you grow from. The moment that you avoid it and you seek something outside of yourself, you're just going to get it in the end, but then 10 times harder. This is a lesson, guys, that we all have to learn on this planet. And I don't want to go into spirituality that much. But yeah, we're here for a reason. And even though you might not know what the reason is, the reason for being here is something that you want to figure out. Why are you here? Why am I here? And as far as I know, the answer for me right now, and I still don't have the full overview and the full picture, is to deliver value. So I hope that I've been giving you some value, some insight, something that you can use between you and other people in your environment, in your network, in your relationships with others, whether it's family or friends or coworkers, to identify where your ego is, what it means, and how to use it. And I'll close off with this, because this is maybe even the thing that for some of you, you're waiting or you want to know that's not a sentence, how to make your ego smaller, because we can inflate our ego, we can have our ego inflated by other people, which seems to be great, but it's only a mask, and it's not gonna contribute to your well-being nor the well-being of the other person or other people. And one of the ways to diminish or to make your ego smaller, first of all, is to become aware of it. I said it before, I'll say it again. The other way that you can do that is to become quiet. Go silent for a while. Do nothing for a while. Meditate even. And I know meditation for some people, it's an allergy word. For other people, it's something that they swear by. Great, whatever it is, but meditate in any way or shape or form that's possible. Maybe you can meditate during, a stoplight break. You're in your car, you wait for the stoplight to turn green. Well, go meditate, close your eyes for a second, and the person behind you will honk their horn and tell you that the time is over, and that's it. And that's a great way to actually check for yourself if your ego is popping up or not. Because the moment that you get this horn, your ego is there, and maybe even your amygdala saying, oh, you need to fight or you need to flee. You don't necessarily need to do that. You can also just raise your hand, nod thank you, and say thank you out loud. Give the other person love, empathy, and compassion, and just drive on, because they are waiting anyhow for you to move on. But meditate in front of the stoplight. Meditate while you're in the bathroom. Meditate while you take a shower. Meditate while you're cooking. I'll guarantee you this: the moment that you start meditating in any way or shape or form, you become more relaxed from the inside. And the moment that you become more relaxed from the inside, there's much less stress, much less cortisol in your body, and much more peace of mind and peace of body. And you'll become more aware of how great you actually are. You become more aware of what else you can do. You become more aware of what is possible for you, because you have this clear view. You know, imagine yourself looking through a windscreen, and this windscreen is full of, I don't know, insects or bugs or mud even, and you can't see clearly through it. By going silent, by meditating, or by going inside for a while, instead of being focused on the external world all the time, by going inside, you bring your mind to peace, and especially your ego. And when your ego is not there yelling at you, saying that you're either worthless, or saying that you have to prove yourself and be right in order to, you know, feel good about yourself, that's the moment that you really, really can take a bigger view upon your life and upon the world that we're living in. And from that point of view, there's so much more possible, you know. And this is what I'm standing for, to awaken those possibilities within yourself and to within myself as well, you know. And I know that my ego is there from time to time. It will, I don't know, take me probably many more months and years and maybe even decades to really control my ego, from the point that it doesn't pop up anymore automatically and wants to prove itself by, you know, having these goals and by having these achievements and by having the certainty and the validation, but by really appreciating myself for who I am right now in the moment, and to say, this is what I stand for, and this is what I believe in, regardless of if other people are agreeing or disagreeing with me or how they treat me. This is what I stand for, and the willingness to say no, and to say also thank you. So I hope that for now, this Facebook Live video number 2, this all about ego talk, was valuable for you. If you liked it, please drop me a like or a comment and answer me this question. If you would give your ego state, remember the 3 ego states, parent, adult, and child, if you would characterize your automatic behavior, your automatic response, which of these 3, and most likely which of the 2 ego states are you often in? And I'm asking you this question to become aware of it. I know that my ego state used to be the parent nurturing part. And sometimes I still have that. I still love that, because it can be very, very supportive towards other people, but it can also be destructive towards other people by suffocating them, by smothering them, and, you know, by being too much in their face. So for me, by becoming aware of the fact that this was my automatic reaction to go into that ego state, I had a choice. I had a choice to go into the adult state, or even to go to flip, you know, and to go into the parent controlling state. Neither good nor bad. Sometimes it just is what it is. But the moment you become aware of it, then you have a choice. If you're not aware of it, you have no choice. You just let it run, you know, on autopilot and hoping for the best. So here's my question again. Which of these 3 ego states, and most likely there's 2, but which of these 3 ego states do you find yourself in mostly throughout the day? I hope that you can give me an honest answer. It's not for me, it's not for, you know, how good you want to appear, because again, this has everything to do with ego, but this is more for yourself. The moment you become aware of the ego state you're most of the time in and is running on autopilot, on auto reaction, then you have the awareness and the opportunity and the possibility to change it. So again, I hope that you liked this video. I hope it was short and long enough. For me, it was packed full of valuable insights and information and tools and techniques. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. I wish you a great Friday. I wish you also a great weekend. Enjoy it. Make something great out of it. And I'll see you in the next one. And that's it. Ciao.